6 months ago, I bought a neglected homestead in rural Estonia. On the property, there were 14 buildings, including a 100-year-old log house and multiple sheds. After 6 years of neglect, there was a ton of overgrown grass and weeds. Shrubs and bushes had almost taken over the yard. Several buildings were crumbling, and all of them were filled with, let's say, interesting stuff. So I cleaned, demolished, painted, dug, cut, and carried until, well, the snow came down. In this video, you will get a closer look at my journey in the first 6 months of owning the property. The first task was tackling the overgrowth. As charming as it was, I did need to move around in the yard and have access to all of the many sheds. I also wanted to have a good look at the landscape underneath to understand what it was that I had actually bought. And with this task, my mother and her husband wonderfully volunteered. And I am so grateful for that, because it meant that I could spend more time on clearing out the sheds and tackle some other urgent tasks that I had on the property. We also had to cut a lot of the bushes too, so that they wouldn't take over areas that could be used for growing vegetables. And we also cut bushes along the edge of the forest so that the trees could grow bigger and I could potentially have some firewood in the future. There was a lot of it, so here's everything in one big pile waiting for the chipper. And we discovered a pond hiding in the bushes. Once the bushes were removed, I could see beautiful autumn sunsets from my yard. The pond itself filled up with even more water in autumn. All this cutting and clearing took months, and I can't take any credit for this. This was all my mom and her husband's work. It was so nice to finally walk in my garden under the apple trees though. Here are some views before and after cutting the overgrown grass. By the way, I really did not enhance the colors or lighting on these video clips. It really did look as green and bright as you can see here. It had been a really rainy summer, and the pond that was higher up on the landscape was already flooding the driveway and keeping a lot of water under the garden house next to it. So with some help, we dug a ditch and we put a drainage pipe inside it to lower the water level of the pond. As you can see, this part of the soil is mainly clay. Fortunately, there are some more fertile patches of land on my property as well. And here's the water flowing to another part, a naturally lower part on my property on the other side of the driveway. There was a surprising side effect to this work, as the cellar under the house that had been filled knee-deep with water since I bought it. The water had disappeared from the cellar after we lowered the water levels on the pond. Another task was leveling the garden house. It was already a bit bent, and the supporting structures had sunk due to the excessive water on the ground and under the house. I had help from my brothers and some moral support in place as well. Next, I cleaned up the terrace and covered it with a fresh layer of varnish. And I really do love the view from this terrace. I had all my lunches in summer on it. I gathered some rocks from the previous fireplace and set up a new one next to the garden house. I also added a cast iron plate here, which was really good for making pancakes, for example. One by one, I started clearing out all the buildings, and the metal shed here was the first one, because my plan was to use this space to store the garbage that I get from all the other buildings. Here it waited for the truck to come and collect it. And next I cleared out this shed. It did have some useful tables and containers, also some tools that I kept. Then I tackled this little shed, which was actually filled with a lot more stuff than the previous, much bigger shed. Next up was this big barn with the most stuff. I mean, it does look intimidating, doesn't it? And here's what the process looked like. Piling everything up and then just smashing it until it didn't look that bad. But I do feel that I need to make a separate video of all the finds from this barn. Eventually I did get it nice and clean, until I filled it with stuff from other barns, that is. There was another structure attached to this barn, which I hadn't even noticed before buying this property. It contained some interesting things as well, as you can see here. After clearing it out, it looked like this. But there is something else I want to show you. This is the view through this building into the forest behind. I find it really lovely. And there's a bird nest that was in this structure. Actually, there was a bird nest in every building that I had. It took me a day to clean up this little red shed. I have a separate video where I show the finds of this building if you're interested. Quite a lot of stuff was left on this porch, and I did make a separate video where I slowly show around here and also what it looked like after I cleaned it up. I am slowly starting to lose count here, but I think we are at building number 8, which was a garage or a tool shed, and this is what it looked like once organized. Are you still with me? Almost done with listing the sheds that I've cleaned up. This is the last one now, and next is the attic. It must have been quite an effort carrying all those things up on the attic, but fortunately it was quite easy to throw down. Well, except for the bottles, those I carried down. And there were some interesting finds like this. Then I covered some buildings with fresh layer of paint, like this outhouse here, the little shed. And the one end of the garage had not been painted, so I did that too. Once the sheds were emptied, it was time to demolish the ones in worst shape, or the ones which were plain ugly, like this one here. I did get help demolishing the bigger buildings, but some, like this greenhouse here, I managed on my own. To demolish the doghouse, we had to cut the bushes around it to access it properly. And here is the biggest demolition project that I had over the summer. I don't even know if it can be called demolition because the building had collapsed. It used to be a stable for animals. They had cows and sheep at some point, but it had collapsed over a decade ago. Most of this building material was just natural wood, so I collected it in piles, and it was picked up by a company who makes wood chips for central heating. The many pieces of tar paper I collected in huge bags, and these were sent to the recycling center. I did not want to keep the metal shed, so I found a new owner for this and had it transported away. Now brace yourselves, because this part is not going to be so pretty. As the bushes were cut and the grass was cut along the edge of the forest, we discovered a lot of places where garbage had been dumped. This is something that was a common practice before the 90s, but it seems that on this property it had continued even after the 90s, as we found packages from quite recent years. There were a lot of glass bottles, plastic bottles, tin cans, shoes, boots, clothes, a lot of plastic. Also a lot of bigger items, like this one, which seems to be a kid's trolley. We also found an old motorcycle buried under the leaves and dirt, and here it's dug out. There was also a proper collection of shoes and boots. Since all of it was in the bushes and hidden by the tall grass, I couldn't see any of it before purchasing the property. It took me a while to properly dig it out and sort it, but here is some of it visible, some tin cans, a lot of plastic. Unfortunately also old medicine and old batteries, and the scariest thing, needles. There were also some interesting finds, like the frame of an old bicycle that I dug out, or this old sewing machine, and a ring. Also found a couple of wallets with old Soviet time coins still inside. And finally some plants that had grown into jars. And here's some footage of me cleaning some of this mess up. As you can imagine, it took me a lot of time to dig it all out and to collect and sort it all. And I'm not even done. Once the snow melts in spring, I can continue with this work. By now I have collected a couple of trailerfuls of garbage, and it has been taken away from the property to a recycling center. I also found a lot of scrap metal on the property. Barbed wire, old buckets, agricultural equipment, chains, car parts, different things. Once the outbuildings had been taken care of, I started cleaning up the house. Here were also all sorts of items, like cookware, furniture, paintings, old textiles, electrical equipment like lamps and vacuum cleaners, some carpets, and a lot of small knickknacks. The most challenging part was to clear out the pantry, because it didn't have a floor anymore and there was a cellar underneath. But a lot of those old dishes that I found were quite cute. Once a truckload of furniture and garbage had been removed from the house, I could start the demolition inside. I removed wallpaper and tar paper from the walls. I also removed wallpaper from the ceiling. And then I removed plywood to open up the original ceiling. In the process, I got quite a collection of wallpaper samples. There were a total of 30 different wallpapers used in this house. And finally, the walls and ceilings were cleared. Here's the kitchen, the living room, and the original ceiling. And here's the bedroom. A couple of interesting things I came across in the house was a window behind the furniture, then a secret door that I didn't know existed, hidden behind all the wallpaper and tar paper. Still functional, as you can see. Plants growing inside from outside, rat nests in interior wall, a hornet nest between the plywood and the ceiling, a bat under the tar paper, and some working Christmas candles. And that was it for the 6-month summary in my new old homestead. I hope you enjoyed it. My little friend and I look forward to seeing you next time.